Can you hear Ruthie?
No.
Just
really? No, it's not coming through.
I can hold on to.
Hold on.
To believe in this living is such a hard.
Okay, I put you up. Maybe that'll change it. I hear it now a little bit.
How about now?
Now I hear it a lot. Yeah.
Hard way to go. Hard way. I'm sending my love out to John Prine, his family, all the musicians that are out here struggling and trying to make our way through all of this. This is my love to you. All right? Let's hold strong. Stay strong. Keep the music playing. Let's keep the music playing.
Well, anyway, I'm going to put that as part of the tape here.
That's good.
Anyway, let me stop that share for a second. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So I'm still, you know, it's a bit of a learning curve, learning how to operate all this thing.
Right. Yeah.
Smoothly. But well, I was reading an interesting article this morning by Emmanuel Saez and Gabriel Zuckman. These are two UC Berkeley top economists, and they're experts on this inequality issue. I call them part of the Piketty Club because they're hooked up with Thomas Piketty in Paris, his big research project on inequality over the centuries, right? Anyway, their point is that other countries have not had the level of unemployment that we are having because they pre-prepared all the equipment needed to protect workers more on the job, and so they didn't have to shut down as many. And he mentions Germany, South Korea. Actually, he says even China. You know, the Wuhan period was big, but the rest of the country did not shut down. I mean, it had lots of gear, right, and all that stuff, but they didn't. So they had a big layoff, big whole thing shut down in that one big province, right? But outside that, you know, it was more or less contained, so they didn't have to shut everything, you know, down, right? But here, we have this thing, you know, going just across the country, and wherever there's a weakness, you know, it's going to explode, right?
Yeah.
And, it's killing New York City.
It's
going to do something. Louisiana is going to get wiped out. You know, I mean,
because of Mardi Gras of all things.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you know, they didn't know because the president wasn't being a leader. He wasn't putting the information out.
I mean, the St. Louis Fed guy, who's by no means a big liberal, okay, he's predicting 30% unemployment.
Yeah, which is higher than the Depression.
It is. And
higher than the Great Depression.
And since we're talking about a workforce of 150 million now, not like it was back then at under 100, way under 100.
Right. Okay? It's even more people.
It's even more people, you know.
Right, a lot more people. Right.
So yeah, you know, you're looking at, I don't think there's very few people alive now. Well, that can remember a crisis of this size, you know.
They have to be 100 years old.
Unless they're black and lived in the South during segregation areas, that's pretty much the same.
About 100 years old to have any memory of it, you know.
But yeah, the Great Depression, you got to be 90, right, to have been 10 when it happened or something like that, right? It's just
exactly.
You know, I know my dad, you know, was now they experienced it, but not like everybody else because they were from Kansas. And out in the middle of the prairie there in Abilene, and his grandfather made a lot of money in the late 19th century, He did. He made a lot of money, you know, and he was like a big shot in Abilene. You know, I think he helped write Eisenhower's recommendation to West Point.
Wow.
And but he lost most of it in the Depression. He didn't lose all of it, but he lost almost everything. And there was anything that was in the stock market was wiped out. Okay.
Right.
And he still had some land, you know, and he had a stake in the local bank, which didn't have much left in it by the time that so you know, but still, I mean, they would remember, you know, the relative change in lifestyle, right?
Sure.
From you know, anything, whatever you wanted to you know, now everyone's going to have to get out and work, okay? And everyone's going to have to get out and do something.
That's
And
right.
he turned the family into a little small army, right?
Yeah.
And I see a woman here in Harpers Ferry doing that. She has 5, maybe 6 kids, ranging from
Wow.
looks like ranging from like 16 down to 6. And she gets them out every morning, whether it is rain, sleet, snow, or whatever, right? It's just this
Wow.
team. And she runs them all the way up on top of Bolivar Heights and runs them around, and they play games, and it's like camp, right? But one thing, because they have to have 6 or 7 people in that house all the time, and it drives them crazy. That's the only way they get back. They're ready to read a book or go to sleep.
Yeah, she's smart.
Yeah, you know, so that's been her approach. But I remember my mother, she was from a town, you know, where, you know, her neighbor had to go around and beg from house to house to raise money to bury her father.
That's sad.
That's West Virginia, you know.
Yeah.
They were from not too far from whatever that southern Beckley, pretty close to Beckley.
Yeah.
Actually, not that close, 60 miles.
Yeah.
Anyway, I see that. What do you think about Jim Justice?
Well, you know, I don't have much of an opinion of him in a positive way. I just hope that he's voted out and never comes back. You know, just stay at the Greenbrier where you're comfortable and
so the I've seen this Ben Solanjo and Stevens. He's got the endorsements of Manchin, and then
I thought that was cheap. I really did. I didn't think that was right.
But Steve
Manchin knows how important his endorsement is, and he really took advantage of the primary. I think that's dirty pool. I really do.
Well,
he doesn't trust the voters to make the decision. He wants to make it for them. You know, because if he endorses you, it's pretty much a guaranteed you're going to win.
Well,
in his mind.
Well, let's look at that question. I mean, is that true? I mean, is he going to beat Justice? Is Justice running? I assume he is.
He's running, but you would never know it. He's not campaigning, and that's the part that I like about him. You know, it's his only saving grace, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
That he's not out campaigning. Yeah. But his opponents are, you know, the Thrasher guy. He's out there. He's wanting to beat him, and he probably will. I think he might. Woody Thrasher.
And isn't the fool from Berkeley County running too? Mike Folk.
Yeah, Mike Folk, but I don't think he has a chance. You know, he's just too unknown, I think.
Well, yeah,
but he could surprise us all. You know, who knows? He might surprise us. He has a lot of support around here for some reason. You know, people know him around here and they like him, but
the Eastern Panhandle doesn't. You know, I mean, its economy. I guess it plays the same for Republicans as it probably does for Democrats, in a different direction. You know, but you know the problems and the opportunities in this area are not like what they are in the rest of the state.
That's true.
You know, there isn't much development in a lot of areas. So, and here you have at least, you know, access to the larger, you know, metropolitan area, as long as the trains.
Well, they say that he's been to every county, but I mean, in 55 counties, and it's just him. You know, he doesn't really have a staff. You know, it's probably just his wife, and you know, they probably travel around. They probably meet a few people, but
who are you talking about now?
Folk.
Oh, folk. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But Woody's got money, so he can travel around in a jet.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
You know what I mean?
But you think he's going to run against? You think Justice is? I assume he's running again.
He is, but I don't think he's. I'm hoping he's going to lose in the primary.
I don't think he will.
No.
Not in this environment. State of emergency, the whole thing.
And he, you know what? To give him credit, I think they called him the 6th worst governor during this crisis. So he wasn't the worst. There were 5 other governors that were worse than him.
I call him Mr. Oh Shucks.
Well, of course. I mean, he's just.
Oh Shucks. I love the kids.
Somebody that rich, he does not fit the mold.
Well, I mean, coal operators are, they're kind of a different. Every industry breeds its own little self-made billionaire. I mean, kind of.
Well,
thing.
look at Blankenship. Blankenship's not like Jim Justice. Blankenship is he's a tycoon.
Yeah. Well, he's also he's a lunatic too.
Well, of course he is, but he speaks. I can't stand the guy, but I mean he speaks in coherent sentences.
I just love the kids.
Oh my God, yeah, he does.
I love the kids. Okay, here we got. I think Joe's coming in here. I see.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me, Joe?
Can hear you loud and clear.
All right. So, my compatriot here of many years is on JB Christensen. Can you see us yet? I can't see.
Okay. Hi, JB Christensen.
How you doing, Joe?
You're coming on as Stephen Armstrong. He must be the host of all your Zoom meetings, right? Yeah.
There he is.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Now we go. Okay, thanks, Steve.
I claim my father's name. I'm his namesake. Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Good. Well, we'll stop chatting about West Virginia politics here on our new show. This is the christening show of Talkin Socialism. All right, and I thought about giving a lot of other names, but since the Sanders campaign is here, and since I read my friend Joe Sims's article on the socialist moment, or at least that was part of the article, I said, it's time to dig into this question and find out what the hell it means. And that's probably going to take quite a few episodes and discussions to come to. But I want to thank Joe. Let me introduce Joe a little bit here. That I think I met Joe first time in 1970. I won't go through all the details of it. And,
that could be another show.
Oh, I could, yeah. I told Joe about a year ago about my memory of meeting him we were both at a meeting and I was trying, and I thought he was too, trying to prove that we knew more about Marxism than each other. And
you won, obviously.
And I think the whole aspiration was part of losing, actually. So anyway, and we had, but over the years, we've worked together a number of times, and I always, we haven't always agreed, but I told him the other day that I couldn't remember anything stupid that he had ever said, and. Of course, I'm sure he can. Okay. But I've enjoyed talking with him and exchanging views and, writing together sometimes over the years. And I welcome him to the show here. He's co-chair of the Communist Party right now with his compatriot there, Rosanna Cambrone, who I also know from years in Los Angeles. I'm welcoming him to the show. He wrote an article, the Fight of Our Lives. It's on the cpusa.org website, and I think I sent you a copy, JB. And
yes, I read it. I thought it was wonderful.
And it lays out. We're at this. Everybody always likes to say it's a turning point. It's a turning point. It's a turning point. Even though you're headed down kind of the same road. And but now you come to something like this, and it is a turning point. And I'm just going to ask Joe to I mean, the part I'm most interested in is the part in his article where he says, you know, this could be or is a socialist moment, you know, and but he has a lead up to it, the context. I'm not going to do that for him. I'm going to ask him to weigh in here and maybe outline the article and tell us what kind of moment it is, in his view. Thanks, Joe. Okay, take it away.
Okay. Well, I hope you'll stop and interrupt me so it's not just a monologue. But
Oh, well, don't worry about that with these guys.
well, you know, it's a socialist moment in many respects, but it's also important to say that it just didn't begin. You know, the economic and social problems in the country have been going on for some time. I marked the 2007, 2008 start of the subprime crisis as kind of the beginning of this political and economic conjecture, if I can use a $30 word, that we're in. You know what I mean? This subprime ripoff, that's the only way that you can describe it, that was directed against senior citizens and African Americans and Latinos, resulted in the biggest wealth loss in communities of color in history, you know, and most never recovered, and that includes senior citizens, Black, white, Asian, brown, and there was a political response to it, first by the election of Obama, but second by Occupy Wall Street, you know, because people kind of understood, had a sense of what was taking place and who was responsible. And if you remember at that time, the predominant political debate in the country was deficits, deficits, deficits. We got to stop deficit spending. And all of a sudden, the young people in Occupy took to the parks and streets, and it shifted, and it became the 99% versus the 1%. And polling shows, you know, from, I would say, 2010 onward, that there was a shift in public opinion with respect to the concept of socialism as people understood it, in the sense that they kind of saw the need for public solutions, you know, to pressing economic and social problems. And that's a really important thing. That is to say that there was a need to put people's needs above corporate profits. I think that was the essence of it. And, you know, Bernie Sanders understood that. And when he ran in 2016, he built upon a public sentiment that was already out there, you know? Yeah. We say in our circles that there is an objective radicalization process taking place, you know, in the country. And that was demonstrated by the great popularity of Bernie's campaign. And therefore putting working class and labor interests up front, putting the need for addressing the crisis of student debt up front, calling for a moratorium on it and a free university education, putting healthcare up front. And don't you know what happened as a result of that? The whole Democratic platform at its convention in 2016 changed. You know, many, if not most, of Bernie's proposals were accepted, you know, and that was a very, very important development. Well, since that time, John and JB, things have only accelerated in that direction. And now we have a situation where a pandemic has triggered an economic and health and in some certain senses ecological crisis. And you have a president and administration which, driven by really ideology, is, you know, fumbling and tripping over each other and causing governors to compete against each other and compete against the federal government for respirators.
Scramble for crumbs.
Scramble, come again?
Scramble for crumbs.
Scramble for crumbs. But the crumbs are crumbs that are life and death crumbs for people who need respirators. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just craziness. And so a big question arises. Is it possible, and I'm not saying it's not, but is it possible for the country and the administration as presently constituted and given the outlook that they have to address the crisis in a substantial way? Because as a result of austerity and private hospital, profit-oriented hospitals and profit-oriented health, you have a cutback in hospital beds, a cutback in supplies, a cutback in everything that's needed in order to grapple with the crisis. Right. And does in other words, John and JB, the infrastructure doesn't exist now to grapple with the crisis. And so God knows what's going to happen, you know, and we just don't know. But what we do know is that unless in an organized and systematic and militant way, we put forward demands that address the crisis in a very public and mass movement kind of way, I think it's only going to get worse.
Let me ask you, let me pause there and ask another question about on the economic side. The St. Louis Fed, I think you mentioned this in your article, was projecting possible 30% unemployment rates as a consequence. And the last time we came close to that was, of course, the Great Depression in the early 30s. And Franklin Roosevelt put forward a lot of plans and was a aggressive, almost really a social democratic agenda, actually, to meet the crisis. And there was relief and some work that was created through public works. But frankly, it did not reverse the impact of that sharp collapse until the mobilization for World War II. Right. In other words, it turned out that it had to be a government federalization of society that could spend more than 100% of GDP. Hold on, let me mute Tony. Okay. Tony, hold on a second. Okay. Anyway, so that the fact that we're going to have a pancaked economy, I think it's fair to speculate that it's going to take a mobilization of work comparable to what took place prior to World War II to actually pull it out. I hear all the Bloomberg guys saying, you know, oh, it's going to bounce back. It's going to be a U shape or a V shape. And not a dead cat bounce like a L, L shape, you know. And so I'm asking you, so given that context of the massive requirements that are going to take place to recover once we get past this thing, how, I mean, the question is what does a program, is Bernie's program fits right in a way, a Green New Deal, you know, put everybody back to work, because these corporations are not going to be there the way they were before this thing started. So what's your view on the size of the program and how much socialism, if you're talking to the American people, is required just to get out of this crisis right now?
Well, you know, Bernie says, and I think he's right, his answer to the question is whatever it takes, you know. How much public works will it take? Well, it depends on the extent of the problem. And by the way, the official unemployment rate will be 30%. What it will actually be, something else entirely. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that they calculated the rate back in the day a little bit differently than they do now. But we have massive dislocations in the service industry already. We got massive dislocation in basic industry to the extent that it exists now. And those are the two basic sectors of the economy. I think the prediction already this month is that the unemployment rate is around 10%, if I'm not mistaken.
I've heard that number, yeah.
Yeah, and so it seems to me, whatever it takes. But in posing that question, it's not just a quantitative question with respect to the number of jobs. It's also an issue of what is the requisite political will that's necessary in order to make that happen, and to what degree are the trade unions in the first place, the working class more broadly, democratic organizations, civil society in general, elected officials willing to fight for and make those kinds of demands. And by the way, in a certain respect, I'm optimistic about that, because you saw with the three bills that were passed by Congress that they had a much more worker-oriented platform and proposals than what you saw in 2007 to 2008.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. With respect to unemployment compensation and so on and so forth. So here again, the political atmosphere is different, and the level of mobilization is different, and the level of consciousness about what's needed is also, I think, at a, well, let's say a more realistic level. Realism defined once again as the need for taking public solutions to these kinds of problems.
Right. For example, I heard the expression this morning, COVID-19 coverage for all. It was Medicare for all, but now the COVID-19 coverage for all. Gabriel Zuckman and Emmanuel Sayas are two big researchers on inequality from the University of California, and part of what I call the Piketty Club, since they are very much in line with the inequality researches of Thomas Piketty and his organization in France. Oh, hold on. I got to unmute some people here. What did I do with JB? There we go. And so this guy, they're saying that other countries that were prepared with medical supplies, and this actually includes China, South Korea, Germany, Denmark, and I forget a couple of other countries. They are not having to shut down their economies at the scale that this one is being shut down. And two things. One is they ramped up the supplies, the test kits, the masks, everything. Two, they're paying wages. 70–80% in China of your wages were being paid for shut down companies, and that's also true in some of the European countries. And that's a big deal in terms of if it ever ends, right? Once the pandemic ends, if it does, okay, you still have a relationship with your employer. I mean, right. It's one thing to save the businesses, but the employees are gone after 2 or 3. Come on. I mean, it's just a scramble. It's going to be, the grapes of wrath again, right? I mean, where are people going to go? So I'm wondering, it looks like that the failure here to do that is going to make it very difficult, even more difficult to recover in any shape or form as you were before. So I think the explosion in realism could be more profound here than anywhere.
Well, let's hope so, because the predictions with respect to flattening the curve that were put forward by that Empire College group of scientists who were studying the issue are proposing a solution to the crisis based on a kind of rolling response depending on the degree of hospital beds and facilities based on the number of patients that are flooding the emergency rooms. And so they see a kind of periodic response.
Yeah.
But other scientists are arguing that that kind of model doesn't include social and economic assumptions and ecological assumptions that underlie the crisis. And they're arguing, and there's a very interesting piece in Monthly Review this month, I don't know if you saw it, John, addressing this issue. And what they seem to be arguing is that according to certain models that they are projecting, that they are very doubtful that that kind of rolling response is going to be adequate.
Right.
No matter what they do, that the health system and the economic system is going to be overrun. And that unless you take more radical solutions now, or at least begin to put them forward, like for example, they raised the issue of socializing the hospital system, in an effort to marshal the resources that are necessary to address just the health, crisis aspect of it. So, and because employers are not paying full wages, and people are going to look elsewhere as they can, the point you made earlier about a platform like the Green New Deal and
Right.
public works becomes all the more necessary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you got? So, JB, you want to weigh in on this? You got any questions?
Yeah, the chickens, everything you said, Joe, is right on. And the chickens have come home to roost. All this talk about, taking care of each other and making it easier for the kids to go to college without having $100,000 mortgage, hanging over their head in the form of their education expense. These are all incredible ideas that Bernie brought up. He was the only one that would even touch it. And of course, we know that a lot of people have adopted that stance since. And Bernie's got a lot of people elected. He's had a lot of Congress people are coming from his camp, and a lot more are coming right now that are in the primaries. So, we have a lot of things to be thankful for in the fact that Bernie has started this movement. He's started a movement that, the mainstream media doesn't like it. Wall Street doesn't like it. Obviously Trump and them don't like it, but it's something that would help us in a crisis like this. I think most people will see that, if we had that in place, or if Trump, wasn't so bad, if we just had a decent president that, even Hillary probably would have never disbanded the pandemic group that was, she would have never done that. We would have been way, way better off. And it's just like this upside down world that we're in right now that, nothing is real. It's kind of like the old Beatles song, Strawberry Fields Forever. It's just like Strawberry Fields. Nothing is real. It's true. I have a daughter in Brooklyn and my granddaughter in Brooklyn, and I'm, I'm very frightful of their living condition right now.
Yeah, it's serious trouble. One thing, Joe. We got about 5 more minutes here on this. The Trump administration has following their well-known path of basically blaming somebody else. and continuing their idea that the best way to rule is to keep, the hungry dog hunts harder is their principle. And so keep everybody scrambling for crumbs, make everybody beg you for favors, and use fear and strike out and threaten and ask for dictatorial powers over and over and over again. That's the line they're going to take. And if anything bad happens, it's somebody else's fault. So are we going to get to the election and have a democracy still left? That's my question. And is there anything we can do to try to see that we do have at least an election? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a good question, and honestly, I don't think anybody knows the answer. I think that what we do know is that we have to fight for it. I was listening to Mr. Biden the other day, and he made the point that we had an election in the middle of the Civil War. We had elections in the middle of World War. If we can do it then, we can do it now. And there's certainly options. Oregon does mail-only balloting and so on. So, but Trump argues that if that happened, the Republican would never be elected again. So they know, they know the stakes. So I'm not sure that.
So therefore, it must be wrong.
It must be wrong.
Yeah. Therefore, it must be wrong because we have to win elections.
Right. And but I think that anything is possible with Trump. On the one hand, on the other hand, he's lost so much support, even from those who are his big financial and political backers. There's been such a stripping away of advisors and generals and so on and so forth.
The revolving door.
I mean, it's like Don Corleone's household, right? I mean,
right. Next thing you know, one's gone, the next one's gone. Who's the last man standing? For the last
That's
one?
right. Who's gonna? Yeah, what do they call that? Musical chairs. Who's going to be left standing?
Right.
Right. And so I think that to the degree that he gets in the way of, and it's starting to happen, their ability to maintain their rate of profits, I think that they're going to put pressure on him and mobilize to defeat. You already saw, by the way, that there was a big victory last Sunday when he agreed to extend the stay-at-home policy until May 1st.
Yeah.
The Wall Street Journal was saying, no, put him back to work. Now they didn't care. They had this kind of Malthusian approach to, herd immunity. Just let the virus spread, the strongest will survive, and we'll come out the other end, no matter what the human cost, no matter how many old people die,
Right.
So I think that if I were to make a bet, I would bet that we would have the election, but I would back that bet up with a whole lot of public pressure and protest, because that's the only thing that they understand,
Oh, I agree with that. Yes, force.
I think we got to keep our eyes on and our ears tuned to what's happening in the trade unions and what the working class is saying and how it's reacting. And there are a lot of strikes taking place, by the way.
Right. Right. We have one right down the road here, and Pilgrim's Pride here at the. That's a little too long a story to tell right now, but basically they walked out over health conditions inside the those factories, and
that's what's new, John, in the country. Starting with the teachers and all the way up through the UAW strikes against GM last fall. There's a new level of militance and willingness to fight and sense that workers can win, in these battles. And that's something that's going to have a big impact during this crisis, So we'll have to, see how that pans out. But I think that if that kind of pressure can be brought to bear in the course of this, you know, it can only have a positive and good outcome.
Well, we're doing a virtual version of that now, hopefully. So anyway, it's 9:30. We're going to have a subsequent discussion here with Tony about the state of the Sanders campaign. You're welcome to hang in if you want to, but or if I know you're a busy fella, you know, so you can take out, you can leave now if you want to, or stick around while we talk about the local or Sanders campaign and what state it's in. So I want to thank you very much, though, Joe, for joining us today. And I'd like to make this a kind of a, you know, well, we would like to invite you back again sometime, you know. So anyway, and but okay, go ahead, JB. Did you had something? Well, hold on.
I think you muted me. Okay.
Yeah.
The thing that's coming out now that I think would be fodder for the next show or the subsequent shows is the fact that Teamsters are going to be huge because they represent all these corporations, and they can do like their own version of a general strike. You know, shut down all the delivery, shut down Amazon, shut down all those people. And they've got a lot more power than they ever had.
There you go.
I like power bases. We need to start enumerating those power bases pretty soon because I'm not sure.
I think it's happening.
I mean, we got like the state. Look at the. I talked to Patsy Nolan yesterday, day before yesterday, and she was telling me that she's a county commissioner here in Jefferson County, and I mean the county budget is smashed completely. But you know the racetrack is shut down. They were getting a lot of revenue from that. You know, property taxes are not going to be paid because rents are not going to be paid and mortgages are not going to be paid, and the commercial state of the farms is in a mess. You know, so people are not going to. It's you know, I mean, essential services. It's fine, but if there's no money for them now, they're going to get some aid from this bill, but it's a mess.
And that's why the point that you made to me in a note last week, John, that the socialist moment begins precisely at the point where capitalism begins to fail. And that's where it's failing.
Right.
That's right.
And that's where it's failing. And that's what we have to begin to focus on. Because when the firemen aren't getting paid and the police department ain't got gas to put in their patrol cars, and the snow comes next year and the snow plows ain't moving, and the post office can't deliver mail, and roads aren't being repaired, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
There's going to be hell to pay.
First victim in Jefferson County is going to be the EMS services.
Right?
Actually, yeah, because they were already in the hole because of certain cuts that were made last year or 2 years ago, and now they're, you know, the two of those guys are working without pay right now.
You see?
So yeah. Anyway,
All right, guys.
All right, thanks, Joe. Take it easy. All right, have a good day. Okay. All right.
Bye now.
All right.
Nice to meet you, JB.
See you, Joe. Nice to meet you, buddy.
Bye, Tony.
All right. Welcome, Tony.
Hi, John. How are you?
How you doing, man? You know, you're looking like you're not getting any more hair. You know, I got my hat on.
You know, I tell you, I was gonna wear a hat. I really was. No,
You don't have to wear a hat.
This is all you get, brother.
I know.
There's no glare. Don't worry. There's no glare. You're all right.
And then there's the wisdom of age, you know, and all these other things that go into. Thanks for joining us here on Talkin Socialism. Tony Russo, who been a well-known institution in Shepherdstown, West Virginia for quite a while, and
Highly respected man about town.
Thank you.
You know, so and he used to show up
Conscience
on.
of Shepherdstown.
Well, and he used to show up on our Winners and Losers program, you know, quite often, and we had a good time. And then I remember I profiled him once for the Good newspaper, you know, in Shepherdstown.
Oh, you were kind.
And what's his name? The editor there at the time, you know, one of my, you know, the Presbyterian Church fellow. What's his name? You know, he's retired. Randy, yeah, Randy. And he said, you know, I thought he was crazy until I read your article.
At least he was honest, right?
Anyway, Anyway, so welcome, Tony. And I'm going to just ask both you and JB, you know, whither the Sanders campaign at this point in time? Why don't you start, Tony?
Boy, you know, it's what a great question. For me, I think the real issue is whither America regarding
Yes.
what Bernie
Yes.
Sanders had to say.
Right.
When Bernie announced that he was going to run this time around in 2020, as you know, I organized the first get-together of people who were interested in Bernie Sanders' campaign. You came to that, and we had a get-together at the town run. And I looked around and I saw what looked to be a room full of Bernie bros, even though I thought I had invited a fairly diverse group, people that looked pretty much like the three of us. And I said, oh, this is not good. If these are the only people who are going to show up, I need to step back. Bernie, in order to win, is really going to have to broaden his base, and I don't know that he can do that. And I stepped back a bit. And boy, was I wrong about Bernie Sanders. All of us, time after time after time, he starts bringing in a more diverse group of people. He's broadening his appeal across the board to the Latinx community, to the African American community, et cetera. He's really building out this coalition. So then I said, well, maybe I need to pay a little more attention to what he's doing here. Then he has a heart attack. And I count him out again. I said, there's just no way. Of course, he comes back from the heart attack stronger than ever. And I really got hopeful for quite a long period of time. And it's like, boy, Bernie he might just pull this off. And
I thought it was like when Gandalf went from the gray to the white.
it was quite amazing. It's like, where does he get this power? This is just amazing. He's truly the Phoenix, but his message very consistent. He would not change the message. He wouldn't go after Biden or any of the other candidates. He kept his message very respectful, and people started to talk about the S word. Socialism became an acceptable word, or at least democratic socialism.
Right.
And I became quite hopeful around the tail end of the summer and into the fall. And 2 days before Super Tuesday, this is how it seems like it's been years with this pandemic, but I was in a crowd of about 10,000 people down in Springfield, Virginia. And Bernie was there with Ilhan Omar, and the place was packed, as it has been around the country. And once again, I got into my political bubble and I said, we could win this thing. We're going to win Virginia. And then 2 days later, there was Super Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we had the second, whatever they call that, second Super Tuesday. And
right.
it just said to me, John, that America, at least up until now, this message is resonating very strongly with about 30% of Democrats, but I'm just not sure that I don't know how we get it to resonate with the remainder of the Democrats, let alone the independents or the Republicans. So I'm not as sanguine as Joe. I think Joe had some excellent points, and I agree totally with his analysis. But I am not hopeful at all that the Democratic response will be commensurate with the need, or that, as they said yesterday on HuffPost or someplace, that Bernie can bounce back. I remain hopeful that he can, but I'm just not sure that America wants to give up capitalism. I just don't see it yet.
Well, isn't it a mess? It's kind of in real life. I mean, I think this goes for nearly every socialist country, quote unquote, as well. It's really a question of how much socialism.
Right.
Because, you know, whether or not you can get rid of capitalism has a lot to do with your level of economic development. I mean, you can't get rid of capitalism if half of your country is illiterate. Okay, you can't. You're not going to. The working class and the working people aren't going to have enough political power to do it. And plus, you have to have a situation in which, you know, my experience study of all that, revolutions happen when the prior regime collapses mostly. They just cannot
Yes.
govern in the old way, and this was true in France. I mean, I think Britain escaped it. They cut off the heads of a couple of, you know, kings and queens, you know, so they could establish a House of Commons, and they had the Glorious Revolution. But most places, if the old regime pancakes, you know, or just defrays and falls apart like it's under the pressure of some externality, right? Like a pandemic or like a plague or
Right.
like a world war, okay? And depending on what country you're in, right? If you get marched across like Poland, I mean, think of Kansas as a potential Poland as the Canadian and Mexican armies run across it, right? What would be left of it, right? And so I'm wondering now so it's really how much. I mean, if you, I was scared of Bernie's program in a way because if me and my wife's the professional economist. I just follow around and study her books. Okay. And
Smart man.
yeah, and you know, we were counting up how much of the economy, if you count the insurance industry, which is heavily entangled with finance capital in this country. I mean, name a manufacturing company, a big one, in which or even a service company in which an insurance company is not on their board of directors. Okay,
Right.
very few, frankly. Okay, and so you have this total entanglement there at probably about the third. I think the insurance capital rate's around the third largest resource of capital in the country. Okay, behind pensions and the stock market or something. Okay, so and then you got, you know, that problem you know, that's becoming yeah. And then you have the Green New Deal. You're going to take control of energy. Okay, maybe you won't nationalize them, but you'll have to get a public stake in each of them. Okay, to be able to really direct their resources in the direction as a national that you need to do. And so you take energy, insurance, okay, the reforms on military he's proposing. You're talking about 40% of the GDP. That's
Right.
40%. That's 40% socialism. Okay, you're
Right.
really talking about, because even Lenin, right, when he talked about, well, you're going to seize the commanding heights. You're not going to nationalize every shoe shine shop. You know that you're not going to be stupid. Okay, although what came after him was a little stupid. Okay, it actually did do that. Okay, and it did work.
Right.
But here we are, and I think so. It is. That's the question: is the 50% socialism solution required to get out of even this mess? And 50% socialism. Well, look, when the slave owners which represented the largest concentration of capital prior to the Civil War, were told that they were going to be exterminated. When they figured it out, you know, that, you know, they took 500,000 lives with them. They never conceded an inch. Okay, and so I don't think you could expect much less of the owners of these resources that need to be nationalized just to get through this mess.
I think you're absolutely
There you go,
right,
son.
John. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You know, if I told you that there would be a contagion that would start in China, go through Asia, and end up wiping out the Western world and completely destroy the economic and political systems that were in place. If I told you that 2 months ago, you would have said, "Oh, yeah, I'm a student of history. I know that the year was 1940, and it was the Black Plague."
Right.
Because that's precisely what happened. The Black Plague started in Mongolia, worked its way all through Asia, came through Europe, and wiped out feudalism. At least some people believe it was one of the reasons.
It created a dire labor shortage. Okay,
That's exactly right.
And you had to become more efficient. You know.
That's exactly right. But it also destroyed the social contract between the serfs, the vassal princes, and the kings. You know, the king had to hold on to land and do more and more land, and in return, they provided defense. They defended the people, and they fed the people, and they kept them not all that healthy, but at least alive and vertical. When the Black Plague hit, people realized the king's not looking out for me. The king can't protect me anymore. This system is now worthless. And feudalism over time was destroyed. I don't want to count out capitalism, and I know you don't, JB doesn't. Capitalism seems to be more resilient than even Karl Marx could have imagined. So I don't think it is anywhere near dead yet. But I do think we have to say, what in the age of coronavirus, America and capitalism writ large are, you couldn't have had a better set of ingredients. America is based on individualism. So, we'll keep partying on the beaches in Florida. People can't not to go on spring break. We are American individuals. We are based on globalization. We can't even get our food without having it shipped in from all over the world. We have just-in-time service delivery. We only have a few days available in our stores and in our distribution centers. So America, and of course, we're based on capitalism. That's why New York now has to pay 15 times more for some of their medical equipment and medical supplies in the age of coronavirus. So this is a crazy way to respond to an emergency. The people are not primary. Capitalism is primary. Now, will people one day and say, this is not working? We need something that supports the people, where the people come first, the community comes first. Let's hope so, because I think that's where socialism, democratic socialism, full-on socialism can step into the breach. I don't know that we're prepared to do that as socialists, but I hope we are. But I think that's what we're facing now. And I think that's what Bernie has said now for some time, is the current system is not working.
So it seems, let me, if I summarize, I'll stake out my own personal position on Sanders' campaign is that one, he should not concede until, I think he's declared to support the nominee, and it may not be possible now for him to, through the primary system, to accumulate. I think the primary system is almost defunct at the moment. There's so many different, I'm going to mute JB's coughing there for a second. There's so many, suppression efforts underway, and there's some natural ones too that the pandemic will cause, right? That I think that the most important thing is for Bernie's campaign issues, especially on the healthcare issue and on the ultimate need for a major federal program of jobs and infrastructure, Green New Deal, whatever, that has to happen. Okay. Now, Biden appears to, I don't quite understand what Biden's been doing recently. He hasn't been doing much. He's, as far as I can tell, he's had a couple of interviews saying he's consulting experts.
Yeah.
Well, okay. What do the experts say? But I'm not going to worry about it excessively or make a big issue out of him, because I actually believe the experts he's talking to, and I think I do know who some of them are quite, are moving themselves, and they're, and you take Larry Summers. Okay?
I was just going to say, exactly.
I think Larry Summers has become severely disenchanted with, many things that he was even wittingly or unwittingly a part of, and the Clinton, hey, technology is going to save us, it's going to be this whole new thing. Everybody's going to be a computer programmer, blah, blah, blah. Well, and there were about 2 years, I think it was 96, 97, when wage incomes rose in proportion to productivity. It hasn't done that for 40 years since.
Correct.
But there you go, but it was an illusion, in a way. It was a bubble in the, the high tech is a big deal, and it is transformative, but it's not going to solve the inequality problem. It just gets worse.
You're absolutely right, John. We love illusions in this country. There was a tremendous illusion toward the end of World War II, as you know, between Bretton Woods in 1944 and the Arab oil embargoes of the 1970s. And in between, we created this lever to be economy. And that's to be what Ronald Reagan and presidents before and after him want to go back to. And the fact is that America never truly existed. It existed for just a moment in time, but never as fully as we wanted it to. Just ask African Americans, ask
Sure.
farm laborers, et cetera, et cetera. But for some people, it was the golden age of America. But it only occurred because of World War II and because of the void that the United States filled for a very brief 30 or 40-year period of time. That
Well,
we can't go back.
well, except that Roosevelt, principally through his wife, I believe, okay, did make a deal with the rising labor movement, you know, which he had not wanted to, but he did. And then in the end, he embraced it, you know, and it was, you know, the backbone, the muscle in a way, you know, as these mass production industries got organized through the big strike wave in 36 and 37, 35. That made a big impression, okay, that there was a serious power behind the social democratic, we need a fix, like now, you know, we need to have public, somebody has to do something. And so you know, we need a leader that can do that. At the minimum, we need a leader that can do that, okay, whatever
Right.
he calls it. I mean, he can call it, you know, his version of progressive capitalism or a little more democratic socialism. He can call it whatever he wants, but we have to have that done. And I think that message, if it gets to the convention and is very strong, maybe all that happens is that, you know, Joe says, you know, I'm tired. And Nancy, can you do it?
Right.
if they really don't want Sanders to be the, you know, I'm just saying the movement at the convention, the power, the pressure of all of our interest groups and the people's needs, that's got to be, you know, cut the bullshit, you know, no, we're not going to, you know, save Goldman Sachs, you know, liberal wing first. Okay.
Yep.
That thing, right? I mean, you got to move. And so that's, I'm hoping that is the destination of Sanders' campaign, you know, is to make, that's what has to happen. And anything else, you know, I mean, the depression can go on forever. It doesn't
Right.
have, you know.
Right. Well, I agree with you, John, and I agree with what you said earlier that Sanders should not drop out in any way, shape, or form. I mean, if people dropped out because someone was in the lead, well, we'd all be voting for Kamala Harris right now. You know, this election has changed hands so many times. It's almost ludicrous. So number one, he shouldn't drop out. Number two, this coronavirus is changing the political, economic situation as day by day, week by week. It's just absolutely amazing, and we need a message by the people, for the people at the convention, and I certainly hope that Bernie plans on coming there and delivering that. Now, in terms of the American people and how much change they will be ready for, I'm not sure, because we've seen, as you said earlier, and JB and Joe said, so many people are all of a sudden out of work. What is it? 10 million have filed for unemployment in the last
right.
the last 2 weeks. Unprecedented.
They're talking
Those
about
are
another 8 million this week.
another 8 million. This is outrageous. So come August, we can't even begin to grasp what the depth of desperation is going to be among the American people. And I believe that's what it will take for Americans to say, I'm ready to go with anything. I'm ready to listen to this guy.
What about Trump all this time? He was always bragging about unemployment, bragging about the stock market, bragging. And you and I know that when somebody does that, it always comes back on them. It always has, always will. And we were just waiting for the shoe to drop. We were, you know, first we thought it was the impeachment. Oh, you know, we'll finally get him. Well, we didn't anticipate that we would have a bunch of corrupt senators and congressmen who, you know, basically held his hand through the whole process and incubated him and protected him from, you know, his his comments. I mean, he should be in jail. You know, we all know that. He's not in jail. You know, everything that he used to brag about is gone to, you know, tits up. Everything is gone. You know, unemployment's up. The GDP is down. You know, everything is upside down, and we're facing a future that we have no idea. Nothing can be counted on. Nothing. And he brought this about. He has to take the responsibility. The voters have to understand that this guy brought us to where we are right now. How do you do that? How do you get the Democrats to make that message clear? I mean, it's clear to us, the three of us. I mean, we're not in charge. We're just three retired guys that are voicing our opinions. But, you know, a lot of people think the way we do. How do you get them together so that you can make a credible assault on this administration?
Well, it's a good question. Go ahead, John.
Well, I think, yeah, it's a very difficult question because, you know, you start talking in detail about, well, democratic socialism means what exactly? And that becomes a knotty question, okay? And plus it has a very long history, right? That, you know, once you get your feet planted in that someplace, let me just say that, you know, you can end up going nowhere fast, okay? So I'm not sure. I think what's going to really my fear is that it's going to be lucky if we get to the election, because he wants to assume dictatorial powers, and he has been given them in large measure by the emergency declarations. Okay, and two, it looks to me like this game. It's a game in a way for him where he plays off states against each other like he's in his little boardroom or something.
Yeah.
And it's an effective gangster tactic in some narrow circumstances. Okay, yeah, you can make people afraid, and you can make people, you know, suck up to you, you know, for favors, you know, and then, you know, they owe you, you own them. But I don't think that's going to work with states that comprise populations of 20 million people,
right?
Like California, New York State,
New York, yeah.
Or other big, even Texas, okay? Although its governor is currently nuts, okay? But still, these are very large populations. And you're really, aren't you getting close here to the kind of games that were being played between states before the Civil War? I mean, not a slightly different division, but you're pissing off California so much, and California is the 5th largest economy in the world. And they're going to start carrying on their own foreign policy pretty soon. Okay, I think they already are in some ways. And you run the risk of disunion. Is the environment you're talking about, in which you're going to try to, you know, do something to uplift everybody when there's forces of disunion and disintegration are more powerful in the country than the forces of union right now. And that context makes me think it's going to look quite a bit, it's going to be uneven, whatever happens. It's not all going to be together, you know. It's going to be, you know, Californians saying, to hell with you, we're not doing any of that. And, you know, your agents are no longer allowed across this border without a pass.
I hope they take me back. I hope they take me back. I'm a native Californian. I'd go back in a second.
Right.
I'll hitch a ride with you, JP, if I can.
Right.
You know,
we'll thumb across country.
Yes. You know, I've been looking at Real Clear Politics since the day Trump was elected to see what's going on with his approval ratings. You can draw a straight line across 44%, and you will see
crazy.
Trump's approval rating has not gone below 44%.
That's crazy. I don't get that.
Except for one short period of time. But guess what's happened since the coronavirus hit?
What?
His approval rating has increased.
That's crazy.
His disapproval
That's
rating.
Probably an ignorant rally around the flag thing.
I think you're right.
You know, but
don't forget. Don't forget.
But still, it's real.
George W. Bush was fading in the polls, and he hugged a fireman, and he won convincingly after 9/11. We give presidents a lot of space during a national emergency. We let them do a lot of things. And I think right now he is getting the benefit of doing something for coronavirus, even though we may think he's meatheaded on a lot of different things. He's getting some bump in the approval ratings right now, which is, to me,
can we really trust? Can we trust approval ratings anymore? I mean, you know, Hillary was supposed to win the last election.
She did,
and Trump came out of nowhere, and nobody saw that coming. Nobody.
Yeah.
No, I mean, a few people. I think Michael Moore called it. There was a few people that called it.
Well, Michael Moore, he calls it every time. You know, I mean, every time I listen to Mike's, he visited our union convention one time, and I spent half the night drinking with him. Okay, and he was such a downer. By the time I said, man, you need to smoke dope instead of drink. You know,
right.
Oh, we're going to be censored on that one, John.
Anyway, probably okay. All right. Well,
I'm so glad you came on, Tony. And you know, you're definitely one of my favorite people on earth. Both of you guys are my heroes.
The feeling is mutual.
We need to keep this going, because right now this might be the only thing that keeps us sane.
Yes.
You know,
now I'm going to post this to Facebook and YouTube, okay, as well as to the podcasting thing. The podcasting thing is only audio, but since I recorded it at all, and turned it into an MP4, I'm going to see what happens, and then as soon as I get it up there, I'll send you guys a link, and you can see how it goes. The video works good. The video is working good. You know, I mean, I can see Tony was good. You know, so. I think when we had Mike on Wednesday, there's something wrong with his camera. He looks like, he's underwater. Looks like he's underwater, and it's not that clean of water. You know, but anyway, that worked pretty good too. Anyway, well, thanks so much, Tony, for joining us on Talkin Socialism here. Yeah. And
thank you so much for.
We'll have another round of it here coming up. Are you good? Are you good for repeat visits?
Sure, and I'd love this half-hour notice that I got about this particular program.
That's my fault. I take responsibility for that.
Proving that we can all talk on a dime, right? You know, it's like the
nobody had to go to work, so
it's like Bernie. When one of my earliest memories of second time I met Sanders in Burlington, we were at some conference at the university, and I was the labor rep that came up anyway, and he told me, I asked him, he said he's running for mayor, and I said, well, do you have any money? You know, he says, well, I was hoping you would give me some, but he says, well, going through the UE for money is like, you have to be, have practically a colonoscopy to get money from you. But
they don't even give money to the
but okay. So then he says, come with me. He says, I'll show you what I'm planning on doing. And so he wanted our support. Anyway, so we got in the car, and we drove around. He says, I have a police band radio. And he says, there's an accident over here on the other side of the town. And it looks like it's a 3-car accident. So the press will be there, And so so we're heading across town over to the side of the accident, and sure enough, the press is there, and they get out, and somebody was injured, and but the cops never want to talk to anybody, right? I mean, they really don't. And so the newspaper's looking for someone to talk to. And Bernie says, I have something to say about it. That's how he got his press, and there's the socialist press, in the early days of his campaign, and he ended up proving that he could was a good administrator too. Now it's true that a lot of his left-wing friends that are people that wanted the Progressive Coalition in Vermont then campaigned hard for them, and he said all the things. But then when he got to be mayor, he found out most of them were not suited for administrative work. Like running an office of roads or utility bills or all that kind of stuff. And so they got a little disappointed with him because he had to, run the city. But he never, he never ever walked away from a principle in my memory. Okay. And sometimes if he couldn't win, I mean, he would take it to the level, and he had a very sharp judgment about at which point you crossed over from winnable to unwinnable. Okay. And, if he had to back off, he would back off, but he would always do it in a way that exposed the reason why it was not possible, quote unquote, to do. And, he ended up prevailing, because he'd fight with the utility companies about, they were the reason why the roads were like hell after every winter in Burlington, Vermont.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
because they did a crappy job patching them, okay, after they would repair the underlying things. And he had a study from the University of Vermont that proved it. That was here's the reason why you're killing your tires driving up and down the streets of Burlington. And so the utility company said, oh my God, we're going to have to stop free service for little senior ladies, because the cost of doing all these things that the city wants us to do, we'll have to terminate that service now. And so everybody got scared, started writing letters to the mayor. Don't let them turn up. Don't let them turn up. I started, no. And Bernie says, okay, clearly we can't, I can't make him do it right now without, a whole bunch of legislation. And so we're actually going to back off here and just, but we're going to put a proposal to the legislature that we want to rename the Public Service Commission the Private Utility Service Commission.
Yes,
So everybody
that's
in
more
the state of Vermont
yep.
knows, and that bill
Yep.
in Vermont passed.
Because
Well,
he was
John,
calling it what it was.
Yeah.
John, before I leave, I want to just underscore what you just said. People may love Bernie Sanders, they may not love him. I don't know, but we've been around for a lot of years. I'm 66. I've seen a lot of politicians come and go, and like you, I've watched Bernie Sanders since he was mayor of Burlington, and I can't recall another individual who ended up going into politics who cares more about individuals and about communities and every single group more so than Bernie Sanders. This is a guy who cares as much about Palestinians as he does Israelis. This is a man who cares as much about poor communities in Africa as he does about better off communities in America. This guy has a heart that is just incredible. And I've been honored just to be to work on that campaign just a little bit. JB's worked on it. You've worked with him. We need people like that now. This country and this world, we're in very difficult shape. We have a lot of people who are in a lot of pain, and we need to truly do what you and I believe needs to happen, and that is to create a system that's truly humanistic in scale and that really cares about individuals and cares about taking care of the earth. If we do that, we can get out of this terrible, terrible situation.
Okay, the path to doing that, subject of the next show. How to get there from that's all. Strategy and tactics is always the
Do you think
the medicine you have to swallow.
Can we get those young gentlemen from Shepherd and from Shepherdstown to come on next week? The Democratic Socialists.
Who is it? Do you know who they are?
I think Tony might know them, but they had a. Yeah,
well,
we need
absolutely. We should explore the different trends.
Oh, we got to get younger people on here too.
Oh well, that's true. We can do that. DSA has a big chapter in Pittsburgh. They're contending for power there, actually, locally. Okay, and West Virginia and the Eastern Panhandle is complicated because of the domination of the natural resource industry over the state government.
Exactly.
And it's not something that you can change from the Eastern Panhandle. You can't, and so it puts you know, the ability to take power, it compromises it because the communities up here and the economy up here, you know, is disconnected. Okay, but unfortunately it is connected because it's that economy that's actually paying, you know, the teachers' salaries and the public servants, you know, and the whole range of licensing development issues. Okay, you know, I mean, it's really a weak situation, and but maybe it's a challenging one we're going to be facing everywhere, right? You're going to have all these
It's
communities
vulnerable.
smashed,
It's very vulnerable.
and so you got to say, well, what is the pragmatic, public interested path here about government? Okay, and I mean, because a lot of the localities, you're going to be on your own. I was talking to Jim Oxer, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and whatever the last day the gym was open. Anyway, and you know, I mean, he was sitting there ready to throw up his hands, you know, and in a way that you know, it just was, it was just going to be devastating. And the problem was a lot of the volunteer institutions like churches and stuff like that used to provide a lot of town volunteers and stuff, as they aged in population and people weren't going to churches as much, right, except for these mega Trump churches. You know, the volunteers, you know, to run town functions without, you know, paying $1 million, you know, millions of dollars for them, starting to disappear. And they got all these things at risk, you know, you know, the park up there, Morgan Grove.
Yeah.
And that's at risk. And the university, I don't know what they're going to do. If they
I'm never going to worry about Shepherdstown. Shepherdstown will take care of itself.
Well, it will, but
faith.
anybody can be anybody that no one's going to be untouched by this.
No, I agree. I mean,
you know?
and that's why this show is so important, because we're talking about stuff that you don't see on mainstream media. Right. You don't see this stuff on mainstream media,
right?
Except for what do they call it? Free Speech TV is on, and Link TV. I mean, there's a few stations that carry the content that we're trying to establish here. And, you know, we've got Sammy Brown. We've got a few local politicians that believe the same way we do, that we can bring on and promote them, because their ideas are the future. They're the ones that are going to be carrying us.
Sammy's been doing a good job on Facebook recently, I think.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
No, she's
answering, you know, and
questions. I mean, she was doing her dog pictures for quite a while, but
right.
You know,
well, and she's
dog
always got something going
and what
on.
she was gonna wear in her exercise routine and stuff. But now that this crisis is here, she's on it. You know, she's doing a great job right now.
Yeah, she really is.
Anyway, okay, guys, let's call it a show for today, and see you in the Blue Horizon. I'm going to close with it'll be tagged on at the end of the tape here. Ruthie Foster's tribute to John Prine, and
nice
Angel from Montgomery, and so that'll be part of the tape too. All right.
God bless them.
All right. Thank you all. Bye.
I love you guys.
See you.
Love you.